The road from Bethany to Jerusalem wound like a dusty ribbon through the hills. Dust rose in soft clouds beneath hundreds of sandals, mingling with the scents of olive wood smoke. Yet amid the clamor, Elan and Mara walked in a pocket of quiet focus. For 3 days now they had shadowed the group ahead, keeping a respectful distance, close enough to catch the teacher's voice, Jesus, hearing his preaching and declarations, far enough to avoid drawing the eyes of the 12. The man in the lead moved with a steady, unhurried stride, somehow part of the crowd without effort. His shoulders were broad, the linen tunic clinging faintly with the morning exertion. Mara tugged her shawl tighter against the cool breeze that swept down from the Mount of Olives, carrying the sharp perfume of blossoming autumn trees. He looks weary, she whispered, her voice barely rising above the shuffle of feet. Even the Messiah must hunger. Even he must feel the pull of an empty stomach after so many miles. Elan nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the figure ahead. He had seen Jesus heal the blind near Jericho. He heard him speak parables that turned familiar truths inside out, like a garment reversed. People saw the truth in a new and different way. Yet this morning the teacher appeared almost ordinary, vulnerable, and human. Then Jesus veered slightly from the path toward a lone fig tree that stood like a sentinel at a sharp bend. It was a great tree, its canopy wide, the broad emerald leaves catching the sunlight in shimmering waves. From 50 paces away it looked heavy with promise, with fruit, and early bear in a land where most figs waited for the full heat of summer. The group slowed and Elan and Mara drew near, hearts quickening. They watched as Jesus approached the trunk, reached up into the lowest branches and searched. His hands came away empty. Not one green knob, not a single early fruit. The tree had advertised abundance, but it delivered nothing. A hush fell over the disciples. No one spoke. Jesus did not frown or sigh or turn away. In disappointment, he stood motionless for a long moment, regarding the tree, and with calm authority of a judge about to pronounce sentence. He said, "No man eat fruit of you hereafter forever," he said. The words were quiet and measured, almost conversational, yet they carried a weight that pressed against Elian's chest like a physical hand. The air seemed to sicken, as though the sentence had been carried out. The leaves didn't rustle in protest, they simply absorbed the decree. "Did you hear that, Elan?" Mara breathed, her dark eyes wide with something between awe and fear. He didn't curse it in a rage, he spoke to it as though it had ears, as though it could choose obedience. "It's just a tree, Mara," Elan answered, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Words are only breaths, they don't change wood and sap. They continued on behind the group, crossing the Kidron Valley, and ascended toward the city gates. All through the long afternoon, while Jesus taught, answering challenges from the scribes, and drove out the money changers, Elan could not get away from the memory of that calm voice. It echoed inside of him. This was no ordinary rabbi. This was a man who spoke as though creation stood attentive, waiting to obey. The next morning, dawn came, and the golden sun over the Mount of Olives. The sky was flawless bow of blue. The air still cool enough to sting the lungs. Elan and Mara stood early, slipping out of the house where they lodged in Bethany, and retraced their steps along the quieter road. The crowds had not stirred, only a few shepherds moved their flocks, and the occasional traveler hurried toward the city. They rounded the familiar bend, and Mara's hand shot out and grabbed Elan's forearm with strength. He stumbled, catching himself. Elan, look! The vibrant green sentinel of the tree had vanished. In its place stood a charred skeletal ghost of a tree. In less than 24 hours, the lush foliage had shriveled into brittle gray husks that clattered together like dry parchments in the slightest breeze. The trunk, once smooth beneath the bark, was now stark and blackened, although scorched by an invisible fire. Not a trace of green remained. The life had been drawn out from the roots upward. Elan stepped off the path, pulse increasing. He reached out and touched the low branch. It did not flex, it snapped with a sharp, dry crack. It's dead, he whispered. It didn't wilt or sicken, Mara. It died instantly. The life was evicted the moment he spoke. Mara stood frozen, staring at the ruined form. Then she lifted her eyes up the road. There, perhaps 200 paces ahead, Jesus walked with the 12. Peter's voice carried back to them, astonished, almost indignant. Rabbi, the fig tree you cursed is withered from the roots. Jesus turned, his face calm, and answered with firmness, Have the face of God. For verily I say unto you that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed and be cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he says shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he says. Elan looked down at the black dust on his fingers, then lifted his gaze to the massive ridge of the Mount of Olives rising behind the city walls, its slopes dotted with olive groves and ancient tombs. For 40 years he had lived under the weight of religious form, endless prayers that felt like begging, rituals that promised much but delivered only uncertainty, a life spent hoping the wind of heaven might blow in his favor. That moment, something cracked open inside of him. The old Mara, he said, his voice trembling. The priests never told us this. They taught us that we were victims of nature, slaves to circumstances. But the Master just showed us the wind itself is servant to the word. Oh my, Mara whispered, pressing a hand to her chest as though to steady her heart racing. Her perception of what was possible, of her own potential, tilted greatly. If he is telling the truth, Elan, then we aren't merely watching a miracle, we're watching a lesson meant for us. They stood a moment longer beside the blackened skeleton of the tree, letting the truth settle into their bones. Then they turned and started up the road again, following the teacher, but they no longer walked as common travelers, curious onlookers trailing at a distance. They walked as students of the spoken word, eyes wide open to a creation that they now understood was listening. Every word they dared to believe, every declaration spoken in faith would meet a world already poised to respond.